Hey everyone, this is Martin, and I'm continuing the series of how to create sustainable income. And um, I'm going to have to take a little bit of a detour this week. I'd planned on talking about a subject of a thing that we were doing right now that does create income in our bank account every month right now that takes almost zero effort from us. But I'm going to push that one into next week because something happened this week that I just got to tell you about. It's a perfect illustration of not understanding the importance of the mindset difference that you need to have when you start looking at multiple sources of income and setting up passive sources of income where the money comes in without you going out and exchanging your time for money. Before I get started on that, though, if you can hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, and so let's get into this. About 2 weeks ago, I did a video on it was called "Ignorance is Not Bliss," and I'll put a link to it up here. And after doing that, about 3 days after that, it talks about kind of a mindset that you have to start changing in your life. But about 3 days after that video went out, I got a message from someone I could tell that they were irritated because, it's just like I committed to watching your video. I wasted 7 minutes of my life because you talked the whole time and said absolutely nothing. And I get that. I get that often, as a matter of fact. But they made a comment in there that, there was absolutely nothing there that meant anything. There was nothing there. And ironically, in that video, I mentioned one of the things that, to me, after 20 years of pursuing this, is still, to me, the most valuable principle that I've ever learned so far. And I may, 20 years from now, or at the end of my life, when I look back on it, I may still point to that one thing and say that was the most important thing that I ever learned. And it was in that video, and he missed it because, he was after, how do you flip the light switch on, I guess, to turn on this whole thing in your life. And it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the gradual process of changing the outlook or the paradigm that you operate in when it comes to creating sources of income other than something that you exchange your time for money in a job with. And that most important principle was one of it came from the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. There's a link to it down below. And that principle was assets put money in your pocket whether you work or not. Liabilities take money out of your pocket whether you work or not. And honestly, when I read that the first time, it stopped me. And this is what my reaction was. It was like, do I believe that? How does that work? Okay, and I read it again, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I read it again, and I thought about it, trying to wrap my mind around that. And to me right now, it seems like an absolute no-brainer. Okay, it's just like that's a natural part of how you create income, and really, honestly, how you create wealth in your life. And it took me a long time to just start absorbing that. Okay, and then after a little while, I read, another couple of chapters or a couple of paragraphs later, it was like, your home is not an asset. I said, what do you mean my home is not? I've been told my entire life that probably my home will be the biggest asset that I've ever owned in my entire life. Because your home is not an asset. Your home is a liability. And because your home does not put money in your pocket, your home takes money out of your pocket. And that angered me. It was like, I'm learning something new here, okay? And I refused to believe that. I refused to accept the fact that my home was not possibly or potentially the biggest asset that I have. And I really took about 2 weeks digesting that. And it was, part of me wanted to believe that it's possibly true, okay? But then most of me wanted to fight against it and say, no, that goes against everything I've ever been taught. And finally I started to accept the fact that I didn't understand how the whole income flowing to me or income flowing away from me worked, okay? And so I finally began to accept that, all right? And so that 20 years ago or 20 plus years ago when I first encountered that principle, okay, and started to change the direction of our financial activities or investing or whatever, however you want to refer to it, and started working on, okay, if that's true and I need to start doing that, then I need to start creating some kind of assets that put money in my pocket, whether I'm working or not. And I began doing that, began working that direction. It probably took close to 6 months to get that first one established, okay? And then we did another one and another one and another one. And a lot of it was related to real estate, and which is easy to do in comparison to many other things. And so here's what gives me the authority to say that you really need to have those mind shift changes before you start worrying about trying to figure out how to create all these sources of income. And that is, from when we started, 8 years into that, from the day we started trying to build our first asset and then the second one and the things that put money into our pocket, 8 years later, my wife and I, we financially surpassed a point in our financial lives that statistically speaking is something that 96 of Americans will never do. Okay, you'll have to figure out what that means. Okay, but what it really means is that, you know what, I've been there and I've done that, and I've done it successfully, and so I understand that it's more important for you to understand the paradigm understanding of creating sources of income that you don't have to spend a lot of time. The things that put money in your pocket, whether you're working or not, okay, the principles behind doing that is more important than the actual activities of doing that. Okay, so next week we're going to talk about an activity that will do that. Okay, and last week we talked about royalty-based payments, which is something that also puts money into our pocket, that we spent some time building it up to the beginning of creating an item that was an asset that puts money in our pocket. Okay, and now we do nothing with it other than just let it produce income. So, and that is so important. I mean, I cannot stress the importance of that. Got a helicopter coming in. I wonder if it's a black helicopter. It's probably not. Anyway, I can't stress the importance of that any stronger than I'm saying right now, is that you've got to start getting into the grasp of those concepts under your belt. And notice there's probably a life flight. That's what it sounds like. So you've got to start getting those things to where you understand that it's not the activity as much as it is the mindset. So, I'm sorry that some of these videos talk about the mindset, talk about the understanding of it, but those are much more important than the individual activities. We'll get into the individual activities next week. Okay, and it is one of my favorite ones, so you'll have to stay tuned for that. Anyway, I hope this video doesn't frustrate you. I hope that you got something out of it. It's a good example of someone that just still doesn't get it. I mean, I talked about ignorance is not bliss, and I mean, he'll never watch one of my videos again, I'm sure, so I can't hardly offend him, but that's a good example of someone that it was showing the actual ignorance of not understanding that there are things more important than the actual activities of creating income, and if you don't get those, you're not going to get the other part of it. So anyway, thanks for sticking with me on this. To me, it was a fascinating opportunity. I couldn't pass on it. I hope you appreciate that. Anyway, so subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you next week. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like and a share, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and the notification bell. See you next time.